The little alien girl drew her sword to save her friend. What happened? The city of New Etherian was Earth's showcase to the galaxy, a place where humans and aliens coexisted in harmony. For Virea, a newly arrived delegate from the planet Zelnara, today marked her first day among humans. Her skin shimmered with a subtle golden hue in the morning light as she adjusted her atmospheric regulator, a small silver device attached to her wrist. Her large, almond-shaped eyes, with irises the color of amethyst, blinked rapidly, adjusting to Earth's particular spectrum of light. Observation Mission 6549. Day 1 begins, she whispered into her wrist communicator. Objective: document authentic human behavioral patterns. The High Council of Zelnara had selected her for this mission because of her exceptional analytical skills and adaptability. Her people were logical, methodical, and valued order above all. Earth, however, had developed a reputation across the galaxy as being unpredictably chaotic. Virea had spent years studying human culture from afar, their literature, their broadcasts, their history, but nothing had prepared her for the actual experience. Theoretical knowledge was one thing, immersion was quite another. She checked her assignment details one final time. Her human guide was named Matthew Carter, a cultural liaison for the Intergalactic Relations Department. According to his profile, he was an unremarkable specimen, 30 years old, average height, average build. His government profile described him as relatable and representative of typical human patterns. Perfect. She needed typical. Virea approached the address, a residential building in the mid-tier district of New Etherian. Not the gleaming diplomatic towers, but not the gritty foundations either. As she raised her hand to the door sensor, she mentally prepared herself for what she assumed would be a formal greeting, followed by a structured cultural orientation. The door slid open at exactly 6:45 a.m. Her carefully constructed expectations shattered instantly. There stood Matthew Carter, hair sticking up in multiple directions, gray t-shirt wrinkled, worn jeans hanging low. In one hand, he clutched a device that emitted a soft buzzing sound, which he moved rapidly across his teeth, producing white foam that occasionally dribbled down his chin. In his other hand, he held what appeared to be partially burned bread, and his entire body was moving. Not walking, not stretching, but undulating to an internal rhythm while navigating his apartment's entrance. Virea's eyes widened. Her training hadn't covered this scenario. Good morning, she ventured, the translation matrix in her earpiece struggling to find the appropriate greeting for this situation. Matthew, or Matt, as his name tag suggested, grinned through the white foam. Hey, right on time! He continued the rhythmic movement of his body. Just multitasking, human skill, he added with a wink before disappearing back into the apartment, gesturing for her to follow. Virea cautiously stepped inside, immediately cataloging the chaos. Clothes draped over furniture, digital screens displaying multiple channels simultaneously. Food containers with remnants of yesterday's meals. 3 different sound sources competed for dominance: news, music, and what sounded like a game alert. Her sensory receptors flickered in warning. On Zelnara, living spaces were designed for optimal functionality and mental clarity. This was sensory warfare. I'll be ready in 2 minutes, Matt called over his shoulder, disappearing into another room. Make yourself comfortable. Virea stood perfectly still, finding no space that met her definition of comfortable. She pulled out her data tablet and began recording. Observation note: human morning rituals appear to involve simultaneous, seemingly contradictory actions. Subject performs oral hygiene while consuming food. Efficiency or confusion? Matt reappeared, now without the buzzing device, but still chewing the last of his bread. Sorry about the mess. Wasn't expecting company until, well, about 20 minutes ago when they told me I'd be hosting you. Virea tilted her head. You were not informed of this diplomatic assignment in advance? Matt shrugged, a gesture she recognized from her studies as indicating casual dismissal. Welcome to governmental efficiency. I'm usually handling paperwork for visiting delegations. This is the first time they've asked me to be a cultural guide. He grabbed a jacket from beneath a sleeping animal, a cat her database supplied, which opened one eye in annoyance before returning to slumber. I assumed this would be a formal diplomatic exchange, Virea said, unable to keep the confusion from her voice. Matt laughed, a sudden burst of sound that made her jump slightly. They didn't tell you either, huh? Look, the higher-ups thought your people might benefit from seeing how regular humans actually live, not just the sanitized diplomatic version. Something about authentic cultural immersion instead of the usual tours and presentations. Varela processed this information. It aligned with her mission parameters, but not with her expectations. So you are a typical human specimen? Matt's laugh returned, louder this time. Specimen? I guess so. Average guy, average job, average life. Nothing special about me. He checked a device on his wrist. We should head out. I need my morning fuel stop. Fuel stop? Varela consulted her database. You require petrochemicals? In a manner of speaking, Matt replied with another mysterious smile, grabbing a set of keys and heading toward the door. Ever tried coffee, Ambassador Varela? I have not consumed any earth substances, she replied, following him cautiously. Then today's going to be educational for both of us, Matt said, leading her out into the hall. I get to learn about life on Zelnara, and you get to learn why humans are simultaneously the most productive and most irrational species in the galaxy. As they entered the elevator, Varela made another note in her tablet. Initial hypothesis. Human typical behavior appears to be inherently contradictory. Subject acknowledges this without concern. Further investigation required to determine if this specimen is indeed representative or anomalous. Little did she know, her education was just beginning. The streets of New Etherian pulsed with morning energy. Humans and various alien species moved in what appeared to Varela as complete disorder, some rushing, some strolling, all seemingly oblivious to the inefficiency of their movements. No organized lanes, no synchronized timing. Just chaos in motion. Matt walked with a relaxed gait beside her, occasionally nodding at passing strangers. Do you know all these individuals? Varela asked, calculating the statistical improbability of knowing so many people in a city of 15 million. Nope, Matt replied, offering another nod to a blue-skinned Taurian. It's just being friendly. You acknowledge strangers without functional purpose? Matt glanced at her, amusement crinkling the corners of his eyes. Not everything we do has a functional purpose, Ambassador. This concept was difficult for Varela to process. On Zelnara, interactions were purposeful, efficient, and necessary. Energy was not expended without reason. They turned a corner, and the scent hit her sensory receptors like a physical force. Rich, bitter, intense. Her nasal filters automatically engaged to reduce the input. That, Matt said with reverence in his voice, is the smell of civilization. They approached a small establishment with a circular green logo. Inside, dozens of humans stood in a winding line, many displaying signs of impatience, shifting weight, checking time devices, sighing audibly. Why are they agitated while waiting for this substance? Varela whispered. Because they haven't had their coffee yet, Matt explained, as if this were the most logical conclusion. It's circular logic. We're irritable while waiting for the thing that makes us less irritable. They joined the line. Varela observed the humans ahead of them, noting their gradual transformation. They approached the counter irritable, exchanged currency for liquid, consumed the liquid, and departed with altered expressions and postures. Fascinating, she murmured. This is some form of mood-altering drug? Technically, yes, Matt admitted. Caffeine stimulates our central nervous system, but it's socially acceptable and legal. When they reached the counter, Matt ordered something called a double espresso for himself and, after consideration, a vanilla latte for Varela, explaining it would be a gentler introduction. The barista, a young human with colorful modifications to her hair and multiple metal adornments in her ears, prepared the drinks with practiced movements that Varela found oddly satisfying to watch. Here, at least, was efficiency. Drinks in hand, they found a small table. Matt immediately consumed half his dark liquid in one swallow, closing his eyes momentarily. Is it causing you pain? Varela asked, concerned by his expression. The opposite, Matt replied, opening his eyes. They seem brighter somehow. It's causing me existence. Before coffee, I'm not fully human. After coffee, the world makes sense. Varela cautiously sniffed her own drink. The sweetness balanced the bitter undertones, making it more appealing. With scientific curiosity, she took a small sip. The sensation was immediate and complex. Warmth spread through her body, and her neural pathways seemed to sharpen, colors becoming more vivid, sounds more distinct. Your pupils just dilated, Matt observed with a grin. Welcome to the coffee club. This is remarkable, Varela admitted, taking another sip. Why do you require chemical assistance to function each morning? Matt considered this, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. We don't technically require it, but somewhere along the way, humanity decided that being awake wasn't the same as being alive. Coffee bridges that gap. Your species voluntarily developed a dependency on a psychoactive substance for enjoyment. For enjoyment, for productivity, for social bonding, Matt listed, finishing his espresso. See those people? He nodded toward a group of humans laughing at a nearby table. They're having what we call a coffee meeting. Not quite work, not quite leisure. The coffee creates a space between formality and intimacy. Viraya observed the group, noting their animated expressions and overlapping speech patterns. No one appeared to be following any communication protocol, yet they all seemed to understand each other. Humans are, she searched for the correct term, inefficiently efficient. Matt laughed. That might be the most accurate description I've ever heard. As they left the coffee shop, Varela felt a new alertness. Her senses registered everything with heightened awareness. The temperature variations as they moved from sunlight to shadow, the complex symphony of street sounds, the subtle expressions on passing faces. I'm beginning to understand why your species conquered chemical rocketry before developing proper meditation techniques, she said. You seek external solutions to internal states? Ouch! Matt clutched his chest in mock pain. But fair. They continued walking, Matt now moving with more energy, occasionally greeting street vendors or pausing to observe something that caught his interest. A street performer creating temporary art with water, a new hoverbike model being displayed, a small animal wearing decorative clothing. Where are we going now? Varela asked, realizing they had no clear direction. Just walking, Matt replied, taking in the city. Without destination or purpose? The walking is the purpose, he explained. Sometimes we do things just to do them. Varela made another note on her tablet. Humans appear to value experience for its own sake, independent of outcome. This may explain their seemingly illogical allocation of resources and time. As they crossed a busy intersection, a hoverbike swerved dangerously close to them. Varela calculated the proximity, 17.3 centimeters from impact. Her heart rate accelerated appropriately in response to danger. Matt, however, had stopped walking entirely, oblivious to the near collision. His attention was completely captured by a small canine being transported in a carrying device. The animal wore a miniature pink head covering. Are your species not aware of death proximity? Varela gasped, grabbing his arm to pull him fully onto the sidewalk. Matt glanced at the retreating hoverbike, then back at the dog. We flirt with it sometimes, he shrugged. But did you see that? A dog, in a hat, a tiny pink hat. Varela stared at him, neural pathways struggling to compute. You prioritized observing a domesticated animal in decorative attire over personal safety? Absolutely, Matt confirmed without hesitation. Some things are worth the risk. As they continued their walk, Varela's tablet filled with observations, each seeming to contradict the last. Humans were safety-conscious yet risk-taking, efficiency-driven yet distraction-prone, purpose-oriented yet experience-seeking. How could a species with such inherent contradictions have achieved space travel? How had they not self-destructed from their own inconsistencies? The caffeine continued to enhance her perceptions as they navigated the morning crowds, and Varela found herself wondering if perhaps there was something her logical species had missed. Some advantage to this chaotic approach to existence that the ordered mind of a Zell neuron couldn't comprehend. Matt suddenly stopped walking, interrupting her thoughts. Hungry? He asked. Because I'm starving, and I know just the place for your first Earth meal. Varela hesitated. Is this establishment also a provider of consciousness-altering substances? Matt's grin widened. In a manner of speaking, but these ones are sanctioned by thousands of years of human evolution. He pointed toward a row of small mobile food units emitting various intense aromas. Ambassador Varela, let me introduce you to the concept of street food. Varela's sensory receptors once again went into overdrive, and she began to wonder if her system could process so many new experiences in a single Earth day. Observation update: human consumption practices appear as contradictory as their other behaviors. Further study required. The collection of mobile food units, food trucks, Matt called them, created a sensory landscape unlike anything on Zelnara. Competing aromas mingled in ways that should have been unpleasant, but somehow formed a harmonious olfactory experience. Sizzling sounds emanated from various cooking surfaces. Humans clustered around each vehicle, engaged in the apparently universal act of waiting for food. I don't understand, Varela said, observing the scene. Your species has developed molecular gastronomy, nutrient optimization, and automated food synthesis. Yet you choose to consume food prepared in vehicular kitchens? Matt navigated them through the crowd toward a truck with a faded red paint job and a sign reading, Big Bob's Burger Bonanza. That's exactly why, he replied. Perfect food is boring. We like food with character, with inconsistency, with humanity in it. A large man with an impressive facial hair formation greeted Matt like an old friend. The usual, my man. You know it, Bob. And something special for my guest. She's new to Earth cuisine. Bob's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Varela's golden skin and purple eyes, but his expression quickly returned to professional hospitality. First time with Earth food? You gotta try my signature burger then, the Ambassador Special. Before Varela could protest, Matt had completed the transaction, and they moved to the side to wait. You've been here before? She asked. At least once a week, Matt confirmed. Best burgers in the district. You regularly consume food from the same source despite having thousands of options available? Humans are creatures of habit disguised as creatures of variety, Matt said with unexpected insight. We like to think we're adventurous, but we find comfort in familiarity. Bob called their number, and Matt collected 2 wrapped packages that emitted heat and an intense aroma. He led Varela to a small public seating area and unwrapped the first package with a reverence that seemed incongruent with its humble appearance. Inside was a stacked creation, layers of various substances compressed between halves of a grain-based sphere. The most prominent feature was a flat brown object that leaked fluid onto the supporting elements. This, Matt said, lifting his burger with both hands, is humanity's greatest achievement. Varela used her scanner to analyze the composition of the offering before her. This food item contains 17 different ingredients, 5 of which would be classified as toxic in sufficient quantities. Matt paused mid-bite. Which 5? Sodium nitrate, acetic acid, capsaicin, ethanol traces, and various mycotoxins in the fermented dairy product. He nodded thoughtfully, then took an enormous bite. That explains why it tastes so good, he said, his voice muffled by food. Varela watched as grease dripped down his wrists. You're consuming slowly accumulating toxins for pleasure? Exactly, Matt said after swallowing. Life is too short to only eat things that extend it. The paradox struck Varela as profoundly human. Your species consciously makes choices that potentially reduce your lifespan because they enhance your momentary experience of that same lifespan? When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous, Matt admitted. But yeah, that's about right. Varela cautiously lifted her own burger, which Bob had apparently modified to be less intense for a first-time Earth diner. The aroma alone triggered her salivary response. With scientific determination, she took a small bite. The sensation was explosive. Her taste receptors registered fat, salt, umami, sweetness, acidity, all simultaneously, all interacting in complex ways. The textures competed for attention. Soft, chewy, crisp, juicy. Nothing in her Zelnaran experience had prepared her for this assault of sensation. Well? Matt asked, watching her reaction closely. Varela took another larger bite before answering. It is contradictory. Logically, I know this contains compounds that should be avoided. And yet it makes your brain happy, Matt finished for her. Yes, she agreed, surprised by her own reaction. It activates pleasure responses despite knowledge of its chemical composition. Welcome to being human, Matt said with a smile. We're walking contradictions. We know things are bad for us but do them anyway. We create amazing technology, then use it to watch videos of baby animals. We can split the atom but can't remember to buy toilet paper. Varela considered this while consuming more of her burger. This behavior seems maladaptive from an evolutionary perspective. Matt wiped his mouth with a napkin. Maybe. Or maybe there's some hidden advantage to not being perfectly logical all the time. Serendipity, creativity, joy. They all come from stepping outside pure rationality. They finished their meal in contemplative silence, Varela noting the satisfaction she felt despite the objective knowledge that this food offered suboptimal nutrition. Was this how humans felt all the time? Making choices they knew were imperfect, but experiencing pleasure regardless? As they disposed of their waste materials, Matt checked his communication device. We've got some time before the afternoon rush hour. Want to see how humans spend their leisure time? You have designated leisure during standard work hours? Varela asked. I took the day off to show you around, Matt explained. One more perk of being human. Sometimes we just decide not to work. Your supervisor approved this? I didn't exactly ask, Matt admitted. I'll deal with the consequences tomorrow. Varela made another note. Humans prioritize immediate experience over future consequences, even when those consequences are predictable and potentially negative. As they walked away from the food truck area, Varela's digestive system worked to process the unfamiliar compounds she had consumed. She noticed a subtle warmth spreading through her body. Not unpleasant, but definitely noticeable. I feel different, she remarked. Food coma, Matt said knowingly. Your body's diverting energy to digestion. You regularly induce minor biological impairment after meals? It's all part of the human experience, Matt replied. We're rarely operating at 100% efficiency. They approached a large public park where humans engaged in various activities that appeared to have no productive purpose. Throwing circular objects to each other, sitting motionless on blankets, manipulating the limbs of their bodies into unusual positions on colorful mats. What are they doing? Varela asked, genuinely puzzled. Living, Matt said simply. Just being human. As they entered the park, Varela felt a strange sensation, a loosening of the rigid analytical framework through which she had been processing her observations. Perhaps it was the caffeine, or the complex food chemistry, or simply the accumulated exposure to human unpredictability. But she found herself less focused on categorizing and more on experiencing. It was highly inefficient. It was also, she had to admit, intriguing. Matt suddenly veered off their path toward a small structure with a digital interface on its front panel. Excuse me for a second. Need to grab something. Varela followed, watching as Matt inserted currency into the machine. A series of options illuminated on the screen, and Matt selected one labeled Classic Cola. The machine made a mechanical sound but produced nothing. Matt pressed the button again. Nothing happened. He pressed a different button. The machine remained inert. Varela observed with growing fascination as Matt's facial expressions cycled through confusion, frustration, determination, and calculation. He pressed multiple buttons in sequence, then attempted to rock the machine slightly. Is this a common human-machine interaction pattern? She asked after 3 minutes of this behavior. Unfortunately, yes, Matt sighed. Vending machines are the ancient enemies of humankind. He stepped back, studied the machine intently, then approached it again with purpose. With surprising gentleness, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against the machine's front panel, closing his eyes as if in communion with it. A moment later, the machine hummed to life, and a container dropped into the collection bay. Matt retrieved his prize with a triumphant smile. See? Ancient techniques. Varela looked at him in awe. You negotiated with metal? Sometimes technology just needs the human touch, he said seriously, then cracked open the container, which emitted a slight hissing sound. What would you have done if that hadn't worked? Varela asked. Matt considered this, kicked it, then felt bad about kicking it, then probably bought a drink somewhere else while still feeling like I'd lost the important battle. You attribute agency and adversarial intent to inanimate objects? Only the ones that deserve it, Matt replied with complete seriousness, taking a long drink from his container. Varela made another note. Humans form complex emotional relationships with technology, despite knowing it lacks consciousness. These relationships include negotiation, frustration, and reconciliation patterns similar to those used with sentient beings. As they continued through the park, Varela found herself increasingly drawn to the small details of human behavior. The varied ways they occupied space, the seemingly random patterns of their movements, the spontaneous nature of their interactions. There was an organic quality to human existence that contrasted sharply with the structured, optimized patterns of Zelnaran life. It was messy, unpredictable, and oddly compelling. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting a golden light across the park that reminded Varela of her homeworld's perpetual amber atmosphere. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of something unfamiliar, a longing, not for the logical perfection of Zelnara, but for something she couldn't quite identify. Matt noticed her thoughtful expression. Credit for your thoughts? I am experiencing difficulty categorizing human behavior, she admitted. Every observation seems to contradict previous patterns. That's because we're not patterns, Matt said. We're people. The simplicity of his statement struck Varela with unexpected force. Her people had always viewed other species as collections of predictable behaviors and responses. Complex perhaps, but ultimately decipherable through sufficient observation. But what if that approach was fundamentally flawed? What if the essence of humanity resided precisely in its resistance to patterning? As the afternoon light softened around them, Varela felt her rigid analytical framework continuing to loosen, allowing new possibilities to emerge. As the day progressed, Matt led Varela through a dizzying array of human experiences. They visited a museum where humans stood motionless before colored canvases for extended periods. They entered a market where humans exchanged currency for objects they already possessed in different forms. They passed street musicians creating sound patterns that shouldn't have been harmonious, but somehow were. Throughout it all, Varela observed the most puzzling aspect of human behavior. Their emotional responses rarely aligned with logical circumstances. They passed a young woman who wept while looking at her communication device, despite being physically unharmed. They witnessed a man laughing uncontrollably at an apparent malfunction of his hovering transportation board. A child screamed in distress when offered a nutritional substance, then screamed equally loudly when it was taken away. Your emotional algorithms appear random, Varela finally commented, as they walked along the river that bisected New Etherian. The setting sun painted the water in shades of orange and gold. Matt considered this. They're not algorithms at all. That's the point. But there must be some logic to your responses, Varela insisted. Some consistent patterns. The only consistent pattern is inconsistency, Matt replied. We feel what we feel, often without knowing why. This concept was profoundly alien to Varela. On Zelnara, emotional responses were recognized as biological functions with clear evolutionary purposes. They were acknowledged, categorized, and managed, not indulged or celebrated. Example, Matt continued, pointing to an elderly couple sitting on a bench ahead of them. The two humans held hands, looking out at the water without speaking. Those two are probably experiencing deep emotional connection right now, without exchanging any data at all. How is information transferred without communication? Varela asked. Some things transcend information, Matt said. They know what the other is feeling because they've spent decades learning each other's internal landscapes. As they passed the couple, Varela noticed the subtle ways they leaned toward each other, the synchronized pattern of their breathing, the gentle pressure of their connected hands. There was something there, a communication beyond data. They found an empty bench and sat down. The city was transitioning from day to evening, lights beginning to illuminate the growing shadows. Your city is beautiful, Varela admitted. Chaotic, but beautiful. Like humanity itself, Matt agreed. They sat in silence, watching the water flow beneath them. Varela was unaccustomed to non-purposeful silence. On Zelnara, silence was efficient, a pause between information exchanges. This silence felt different. It had texture, substance. You're unusually quiet, Matt observed after a while. Culture shock. She nodded slowly. Your people live with chaos, no logic, no protection. You eat poison, talk to machines, play with danger, laugh at pain. She turned to look at him directly. Yet, you smile more than any species I've met. Matt raised an eyebrow. So, are we terrifying or inspiring? She studied his face. The casual arrangement of features, the slight asymmetry, the small scar near his left eyebrow, the eyes that contained an entire universe of unspoken thoughts. In this unremarkable human, she suddenly saw something remarkable. Both, she finally answered. Matt smiled and Varela felt something shift inside her, a recalibration of priorities, a questioning of certainties. Can I ask you something? Matt said, turning to face her more directly. What's it like on Zelnara? Really like, not the diplomatic version. Varela hesitated. She had not been instructed to share details about her world, only to observe and report on human behavior. But something about this moment, this human, made her want to reciprocate his openness. Zelnara is perfect, she began. Every system optimized, every process refined through generations of improvement. We eliminated inefficiency centuries ago. Our cities are designed for maximum functionality. Our social structures minimize conflict. Our educational systems identify and develop individual capabilities for collective benefit. Sounds orderly, Matt remarked. It is, Varela confirmed. We value order above all. Through order comes progress. And happiness, Matt asked. Do you value that too? The question caught Varela off guard. Happiness is not a metric we measure. Contentment through purpose is our goal. But are you happy? I mean you personally. Right now. Varela had never been asked such a direct question about her internal state. On Zelnara, individual experience was relevant only insofar as it contributed to or detracted from collective function. I am operating within acceptable parameters, she answered automatically. Matt laughed. That's not what I asked. I don't know how to answer differently, Varela admitted. We don't think in terms of individual happiness. Try, Matt encouraged. Right now, in this moment, how do you feel? Varela closed her eyes, turning her attention inward. She catalogued the sensations, the gentle evening breeze against her skin, the lingering taste of unfamiliar foods, the subtle background rhythm of the city, the presence of the human beside her. I feel, she searched for the right word, alive, more alive than I can remember feeling before. When she opened her eyes, Matt was watching her with an expression she couldn't categorize. That's what we chase, he said softly, that feeling of aliveness, all the chaos, all the messiness. It's in service to that feeling. Even at the cost of efficiency, of progress. What's the value of progress if you're not alive enough to feel it? Matt countered. What's the point of a perfect world if you're numb to its perfection? The question lingered between them as the last light faded from the sky. Around them, the city transformed. New rhythms emerged. Different humans occupied the spaces. The energy shifted from productive to celebratory. There's a night market not far from here, Matt said, standing and offering his hand. Different kind of human experience altogether. Want to see? Varela looked at his extended hand. Such a simple gesture, yet loaded with implication. To take his hand would be an acknowledgement of connection, a physical manifestation of trust. It would be deeply unnecessary. She could follow him without physical contact. It would be inefficient. Their walking patterns might become synchronized, reducing optimal movement. It would be unprofessional. Her mission was to observe, not participate. She took his hand. The warmth of human contact traveled up her arm, triggering a cascade of neurochemical responses she hadn't experienced before. As they walked toward the night market still connected, Varela made a final note in her tablet. Observation update. Human behavior cannot be fully understood through observation alone. Some aspects require participation. She closed her tablet and, for the first time that day, simply allowed herself to experience without analyzing. The night market unfolded before them in a riot of color and sound. Humans moved in patterns that defied prediction, their faces illuminated by floating light orbs and holographic advertisements. Music pulsed from multiple sources, somehow converging into a unified rhythm. Welcome to Humanity After Dark, Matt said with a grin. This is where we really shine. The night market was humanity amplified. All the contradictions, inefficiencies, and inexplicable behaviors Varela had observed throughout the day were now heightened, illuminated, celebrated. Humans danced without designated dance areas. They consumed food while standing, walking, even sitting on the ground. They exchanged currency for objects with no apparent function beyond visual appeal. Most striking to Varela was the laughter. It erupted spontaneously, rippled through crowds, bridged gaps between strangers. The sound fascinated her. On Zelnara, vocal expressions of amusement were restrained, appropriate responses to specific stimuli. Here, laughter seemed to generate itself, feeding on its own energy. Matt guided her through the labyrinth of stalls and performers, their hands still connected. He seemed to move instinctively, without planned trajectory, yet always arriving at something worth experiencing. A vendor creating intricate sugar sculptures, a holographic poet whose words materialized as three-dimensional objects, a group of dancers whose bodies created impossible geometries. How do you know where to go? Varela asked. You haven't consulted any information sources. Matt shrugged. I don't know where to go. That's the fun part. You navigate without destination? Best way to find what you didn't know you were looking for, he replied, pulling her toward a stall emitting a sweet, floral aroma. The vendor, an elderly woman with intricate patterns embedded in her skin, smiled as they approached. First time for your friend? She asked Matt. First day on Earth, Matt confirmed. The woman's eyes widened with delight. Then she must try my specialty. Her gnarled hands moved with surprising grace as she manipulated a gelatin-like substance into a spiral pattern, then infused it with what appeared to be luminescent nectar. She handed the creation to Varela with a formal bow. The taste of dreams, dear one. Varela accepted the offering uncertainly. This contains bioluminescent compounds, she observed. And memories, the woman added with a wink. Matt paid for the item, then watched expectantly as Varela examined it. It won't bite, he assured her, though it might tingle a bit. With scientific curiosity, Varela took a small bite. The sensation was unlike anything in her experience. The substance dissolved instantly, releasing flavors that seemed to evolve as they spread across her palate. More surprisingly, each flavor triggered an image in her mind. A beach she had never visited, a forest canopy seen from above, the feeling of rain on upturned face. These are not my memories, she said, astonished. The old woman smiled. They're everyone's memories. The nectar comes from flowers that grow in the memorial gardens, where people go to remember their most precious moments. The plants absorb emotional resonance. That's not scientifically possible, Varela stated. Matt laughed. That's what makes it interesting. As they continued through the market, Varela found her analytical framework further dissolving. She stopped recording observations, stopped categorizing behaviors, stopped searching for patterns. Instead, she simply experienced the press of bodies as they navigated crowded passages, the cacophony of voices in dozens of languages, the seemingly endless variety of sensory stimuli. They paused at the center of the market, where a circular clearing had formed around a group of musicians. The instruments were ancient, physical objects that produced sound through manual manipulation rather than programmed algorithms. The music they created was imperfect, with subtle variations in timing and tone that should have been displeasing, but somehow enhanced the emotional impact. Humans had begun to move in response to the music, their bodies swaying, turning, connecting, and separating in organic patterns. Dancing, Matt explained, seeing her watching, moving for the joy of movement. We have coordinated physical expression on Zelnara, Varela said, but it's synchronized, ceremonial. This isn't about ceremony, Matt said. It's about feeling the music in your body and letting your body respond. Before she could protest, Matt had pulled her into the circle of dancers. I don't know the correct movements, she objected. There are no correct movements, Matt assured her. Just move however the music makes you feel. Varela stood frozen as humans swirled around her, their bodies expressing something beyond her comprehension. Matt began to move, not in any pattern she could discern, but with an internal logic that seemed connected to the rising and falling sounds. I cannot do this, she said, feeling genuinely distressed for the first time that day. I don't understand the parameters. Matt stopped dancing and faced her. That's exactly it. There are no parameters. That's what you've been seeing all day, Varela. We live in the spaces between parameters. She shook her head. My people would never understand this. How can I report on something I cannot categorize? Maybe that's what you should report, Matt suggested, that there are things in the universe that defy categorization, that trying to fit everything into neat boxes misses the point entirely. The music swelled around them, the rhythm becoming more insistent. Varela felt it resonating in her chest, triggering physiological responses she couldn't suppress. Just close your eyes, Matt said gently. Stop trying to understand and just feel. With uncertainty unlike anything she had experienced, Varela closed her eyes. The darkness amplified her other senses. The music became more present, the vibrations through the ground more noticeable, the energy of the crowd more palpable. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to move. Just small shifts at first, weight transferring from one foot to the other, shoulders swaying slightly, head tilting in response to melodic changes. That's it, Matt encouraged. his voice reaching her through the darkness. With her eyes still closed, Varela allowed her movements to expand, to become less calculated. She felt a strange liberation in this surrender to sensation, this abandonment of analysis. Her body knew things her mind had never considered. When she finally opened her eyes, she found Matt watching her with an expression of genuine delight. "See," he said, "you've got humanity in you after all." Around them, the dance continued, humans connecting and separating in patterns as old as their species, courtship, community, celebration, joy, all expressed through movement. Viraya found herself moving with them, no longer an observer, but a participant in this ancient ritual. As the night deepened, they eventually extracted themselves from the market. The city had transformed yet again, quieter now, more intimate, with small gatherings replacing the large crowds of day and early evening. They walked toward the diplomatic quarter, where Viraya's temporary residence awaited. The stars above were partially visible through New Ethereum's atmospheric filters, a sprinkling of distant lights echoing the ground-bound illumination of the city. "What will you tell your people?" Matt asked as they approached the embassy platform. "About humans?" Varela considered this carefully. Her mission had been to document and categorize human behavioral patterns, to create a comprehensive analysis of their societal functions. She had collected data, recorded observations, experienced direct interactions, yet none of it seemed to capture the essence of what she had learned. "I'll write that humans are unpredictable, reckless, and somehow beautiful," she finally said, "that your routine is a rebellion against extinction. Your chaos is a language of life." Matt's smile was softer now, tinged with something that might have been respect. Not bad for one day's observation. They reached the embarkation point, the transport beam ready to return her to the diplomatic compound. She paused before stepping into it. "Will you file your report now?" Matt asked. She turned to face him fully. "Yes, but I find myself reluctant to conclude this research. There's a lot more human behavior to observe," Matt said. "One day barely scratches the surface." "Would additional observation days be possible?" Varela asked, surprised by her own eagerness. "I think that could be arranged," Matt replied. "Though I should warn you, the more you observe us, the less sense we might make." "I'm beginning to think that's the point," Varela said, a smile forming unbidden on her lips. Matt nodded. "Quick study. You're going to understand humans better than we understand ourselves." She stepped onto the platform, the blue light of the transport beam beginning to envelop her. "Will you be my guide again?" "Count on it," Matt said. Then with characteristic human unpredictability, he added, "Just maybe not before 9 a.m. Some human mysteries, like how I function without coffee, are better left unexplored." As the transport beam activated, Varela felt a sensation she had never experienced before. Anticipation untethered from purpose, desire uncoupled from function. In her quarters, she would compose her official report, filled with data points, observations, and analyses. But she knew it would capture only the shadow of her experience, not its substance. The true revelation of her day among humans couldn't be quantified or categorized. It resided in the spaces between observable behaviors, in the laughter that served no evolutionary purpose, in the connections that transferred no data, in the beauty discovered without intention. As she dematerialized, Viraya carried with her a new understanding, not just of humanity, but of the limitations of understanding itself. Some things could not be known through study alone. Some things had to be felt. And on Zelnara, a world of perfect order and incomparable efficiency, perhaps that was the most valuable data of all.